You tried New Coke. Everybody tried New Coke. Coca-Cola launched a brand new formula in 1985, and within weeks the whole country demanded the original back. That was just one of 60. One of these was a frozen dinner that promised restaurant quality and delivered something that tasted like the tray it came in. Another was a soda from a company that had absolutely no business making beverages. The 1980s were the decade when the American grocery industry believed it could sell you anything if the jingle was catchy enough, the box was bright enough, and the commercial ran during Saturday morning cartoons. Pudding in a tube, yogurt from a squeeze bottle, cereal that tasted like dessert and called itself nutrition. Some of them lasted a single quarter before they vanished from every shelf in the country. Others stuck around just long enough for you to forget they ever existed. Here are 60 foods from the 1980s that failed. Microsoft Bob was not a person, but it sure tried to act like one. Introduced in the mid-1990s, Bob was supposed to make computers friendlier for beginners. Instead, it made them unbearable. The idea was to turn your screen into a cartoon house, complete with a golden retriever assistant and rooms you had to click through to find your apps. It was like playing a game you never asked to play, just to open your word processor. Bob smiled a lot. He asked if you needed help. He was the digital neighbor no one invited. Microsoft thought people wanted personality in their software. What they actually wanted was speed and simplicity. Bob was clunky, slow, and too cutesy for its own good. It turned every basic task into an awkward journey through fake furniture and talking clipboards. And it required more processing power than most home computers could handle. That was the final nail. Bob vanished quietly after a year, never to be heard from again, except maybe in those late-night YouTube lists of tech fails. Microsoft learned its lesson eventually. They gave us Clippy a few years later, and somehow even Clippy made more sense. Bob was not just a failure, it was a reminder that good intentions do not always make good software. Sometimes less really is more. Okay. Barbie fashion designer CD-ROM sounded like a dream until you actually booted it up. In theory, it was supposed to let kids design outfits for Barbie, print them, and even dress up their dolls in real fabric. It promised creativity and interactivity. But what you got instead was clunky graphics, laggy controls, and a user interface that felt like it was designed in 5 minutes. It was slow, it was limited, and for a product tied to one of the most iconic brands in the world, it was shockingly underwhelming. The software ran on early home computers, which meant crashing was common and patience was mandatory. The actual gameplay? Repetitive. You picked colors, you clicked patterns, and then you waited forever to print something that barely stuck together. It looked glamorous on the box, but played like a PowerPoint presentation. For many kids, this was their first experience with disappointment in the digital age. Barbie deserved better, so did the players. Instead of sparking imagination, it just kind of sat there, slow, awkward, and way less fun than just using your own scissors and glitter. No fear. Apparel was the loudest, quiet confidence the 1990s had to offer. It was for kids who did not just play sports, they lived them. The brand was all over dirt bikes, snowboards, skateboards, anywhere speed met attitude. Their slogans were printed in bold block letters. Second place is the first loser. Fear is a choice. Every shirt felt like it came with its own soundtrack. But as powerful as the message was, the identity never expanded. The brand aged with its first fans and could not grow beyond the extreme sports bubble it had built. Fashion trends moved fast in the early 2000s, and suddenly, baggy graphic tees looked more tired than tough. It did not help that other streetwear brands started merging style with subculture better. No Fear got left behind. The irony is hard to ignore. The brand that told kids to conquer their fears fell to its own fear of evolving. But for those who wore it, it was not just clothing, it was armor. And even now, somewhere in a storage bin or a thrift store, that old shirt still stares back, daring the world to underestimate you again. The shower radio was supposed to be genius. Imagine stepping into the steam with your favorite disco tunes blaring while you shampooed. In the 1970s, these radios were marketed as waterproof miracles, small enough to hang on the shower head, futuristic enough to make every morning feel like a concert. The ads promised crystal clear sound and convenience like never before. Reality was less impressive. The plastic cases fogged up after 2 showers, condensation sneaked inside, and batteries corroded in record time. Static overtook the songs, leaving you singing along to Fuzz instead of the Bee Gees. And when water really got in, sparks, smoke, or silence. Kids thought it was cool for about 5 minutes, blasting local stations while pretending to be rock stars behind the curtain. Parents groaned when yet another set of batteries was ruined. Most ended up on bathroom counters, never hung in showers again. Some brands tried to upgrade by making clunkier waterproof boxes, but by then the fad was already circling the drain. Homeowners realized singing in the shower was just fine without technology risking electrocution. Today, waterproof Bluetooth speakers finally do what those shower radios never could. But back then, it was just another overhyped gadget that fizzled out fast. Do you remember twisting the tuner with wet fingers, desperate to catch a song before the static swallowed it whole? The commercials were insane, giant fruit crashing down on people's heads as they chewed candy and grinned like maniacs. Bonkers. Fruit chews were a direct attack on boring snacks. Each piece had a tangy outer shell and a soft fruity inside. They were fun to say, fun to eat, and perfectly engineered for the 1980s sugar rush. You could find them everywhere: convenience stores, lunch lines, corner stores with sticky floors. Then one day they were gone. No farewell, no explanation. Just gone. Some say the flavors were too bold. Others say the market shifted toward more subtle, health-conscious candy. Either way, bonkers was a casualty of changing times. What made it great, its ridiculousness, was also what made it unsustainable. You will not find bonkers in stores today. But if you mention them to the right person, you will see their eyes widen. They will smile and say something like, "I forgot all about those." And for a moment, they will be back in the world of neon shoelaces and arcades, gripping a candy that made no sense but all the difference. Bonkers did not just vanish. It exploded and left a gap nothing ever quite filled. There was a time when walking into a Radio Shack and seeing a Tandy computer on display felt like stepping into the future. These were not just machines, they were status symbols. Having one meant your family was ahead of the curve. Tandy was Radio Shack's answer to IBM and Apple, and for a short while, it worked. The price was right, and the software support was decent. Schools even started to adopt them. But this was the 1980s, and the tech world was evolving fast. You could learn basic programming in your bedroom or type out homework assignments that actually looked professional. Tandy helped make personal computing feel possible for everyday families. Tandy tried to do it all, from computers to peripherals to proprietary software, and none of it could keep up with the competition. IBM opened their systems, and Apple got sleek. Meanwhile, Tandy stayed clunky. The name started to feel dated, and the machines began collecting dust. Radio Shack doubled down instead of pulling back. By the 1990s, the computers were gone, and the stores were not far behind. Tandy is one of those names that feels like a ghost now, an echo of when technology was still a little bit magical. The kind of brand you bring up and people say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Then comes the silence. Frito-Lay Tato skins were supposed to feel like an upgrade, thicker, richer, and more satisfying than your average potato chip. Made with real potato skins, they promised something heartier, a kind of bar snack you could take home. The idea worked at first. The packaging was bold, the flavors were savory, and people were curious. But the taste was flat. They were oddly dry and had a strange aftertaste. Some flavors like bacon and cheddar overwhelmed the palate, while others like ranch barely registered. They crumbled in the bag. The texture felt stale even when they were fresh. And despite the name, they did not remind anyone of actual potato skins. Sales lagged, then plummeted. Frito-Lay pulled the product, and though other brands tried to revive the idea, none lasted. Today, Tato skins are remembered mostly by people who bought them once and never again. Sunburst clocks, brass peacocks, oversized metal sculptures of sailing ships. If it glittered and could be nailed to drywall, it was probably up there. Wall decor in the 1970s took the loudest ideas from mid-century modern and cranked them past 10. The sunburst clock especially became the crown jewel of every living room, often mounted above a fireplace or a sagging plaid couch. It was supposed to say, "Sophisticated modern family," but what it actually said was, "Time stopped in 1973." These pieces aged fast. Dust built up in the corners. The faux gold finishes dulled. And eventually, people began to question why a clock needed 20 sharp metal rays stabbing out into their personal space. Like so many things from the 70s, it was a style built on boldness. And boldness is a hard thing to live with, especially when it came in shades of burnt orange and baby poop brown. Before cell phones, there were landlines. And before minimalism, there were designer phone covers. And boy, did the 1980s go all in. You could not just have a phone, you had to dress it. We are talking fur-lined receivers, leopard print handsets, and rhinestone-covered cradles. Nothing screamed glamour, like trying to have a conversation with what looked like a bedazzled chinchilla pressed against your ear. There was even one that looked like a hamburger. Why? No one really knows. But the 1980s were not about asking why. They were about asking, does this come in glitter pink? People wanted their rotary phones to match their shag carpet and floral wallpaper, and these accessories delivered poorly. The covers fell apart. They muffled the sound. And let us be honest, no emergency call was improved by digging through a layer of sequins. It turned something simple into a full-time job. You had to prepare to use your phone. The trend eventually fizzled out, mostly because the novelty wore off and the practicality never existed in the first place. Still, the 1980s loved their flair, especially when you could wear it, like, say, around your neck in the most jingly way possible. There was a brief, glorious moment in the 1980s when being a math nerd actually made you cool, and that was all thanks to the digital calculator watch. You could do basic math right on your wrist. Addition, subtraction, maybe a little division if you were feeling wild. These watches were sleek, futuristic, and they gave kids the illusion of being a young computer genius. But the novelty wore off faster than a sticker on a locker. Teachers banned them from classrooms almost instantly. Kids were using them to cheat on math tests or just to show off during spelling bees. Parents got tired of replacing batteries, and school administrators were not thrilled with little kids clicking away during morning announcements. Plus, if you had even slightly chubby fingers, good luck hitting the right button. It was a gadget that promised convenience, but delivered mostly frustration and a few detention slips. And while that fad disappeared into backpacks and sock drawers, another 1980s product was trying way too hard to sell itself with big names and bigger commercials. So let us talk about telex car phones, the early kind. These were supposed to be the peak of convenience, your own private phone line inside your car. Sounds slick, right? Except using one felt like yelling into a toaster that barely heard you. The equipment alone took up half your trunk, with clunky transceivers and roof antennas that made your car look like a spy van. You would pick up the phone, wait for a signal, and then shout into the handset while everyone in traffic stared at you like you were calling from the moon. Reception? Spotty on the best of days. Dropouts were constant, and unless you were in the middle of a major city, the odds of actually getting through were slim to none. Add to that the price tag, which could run higher than the car itself, and it becomes pretty clear why telex car phones never caught on. Not to mention, you had zero privacy. People in the next lane could hear your entire conversation. It was supposed to be the future, but it felt more like a prank. Still, if we are talking about future flops, nothing tops the brief moment in time where Hertz thought regular folks might fly to work. Before digital streaming platforms like Spotify, the audio cassette reigned supreme, offering a personal touch to music curation through the creation of mixtapes. Philips launched this innovative format in the 1960s, transforming cassettes into powerful means of expression beyond mere songs. Despite being overshadowed by CDs and MP3s, cassettes have seen a revival among those nostalgic for a tangible music experience. Mixtapes, meticulously assembled, symbolized affection and personal milestones, embodying the art of sharing music intimately. The ritual of rewinding tapes may have faded, but the essence of mixtapes endures, evoking a bygone era where music sharing was a thoughtful, personal gesture. Today, the audio cassette remains a beloved relic, celebrated for its role in crafting heartfelt musical narratives. Schiaparelli perfumes once lived in the same breathless league as Chanel and Dior. With their surrealist bottles and bold floral compositions, they brought high fashion to the dressing tables of everyday American women. It was not just a scent, it was a statement. In the 1970s, Schiaparelli's legacy still lingered, but America was shifting. Fashion was getting younger, louder, and more synthetic. The brand struggled to adapt. Department stores gave shelf space to trendier, punchier names. The old-world elegance of Schiaparelli felt out of step in a decade of disco and denim. And somewhere along the way, the company let go of its American foothold. Licensing fell apart. Distribution waned. What had once been a symbol of European sophistication became something whispered about in vintage shops. Women who once dabbed it on before dinner parties now found their favorite scents discontinued, forgotten. For some, it was just a bottle, but for others, it was identity. A sense of self wrapped in rose and bergamot, and losing that, quietly, without warning, felt like losing a part of the woman they once were. Earring magic. Ken was a Barbie doll accessory turned cultural controversy that no one at Mattel saw coming. Released in 1993, this version of Ken came with a lavender mesh shirt, a leather vest, bleached hair, and, most notably, a necklace that looked an awful lot like a piece of adult jewelry worn in certain circles. Mattel said it was just a ring on a chain. Critics, comedians, and most of the internet disagreed. The fashion world had a field day. Late-night television could not stop talking about it. Parents were confused. Kids were just trying to play. Ken had never been so edgy or so unintentionally controversial. Sales actually went through the roof at first. Then Mattel pulled the doll from shelves without a word. It became a collector's item almost overnight. But the bigger story was how one plastic doll sparked a national conversation about representation, identity, and what happens when corporations try to be trendy without understanding the trend. Earring magic. Ken was a doll, sure, but it was also a moment, a very 1990s moment. The kind you remember not because it worked, but because it absolutely did not. Harley-Davidson perfume was the brand extension absolutely no one saw coming, and for good reason. In the 1990s, someone at Harley-Davidson decided to bottle up the spirit of the open road and turn it into a fragrance. The result? A line of perfumes and colognes that smelled less like leather and motor oil and more like a boardroom trying way too hard. It was an awkward mashup of tough guy branding and department store sensibility. Imagine walking into a motorcycle dealership and walking out with a floral-scented gift set. The core Harley audience, the rugged, rebellious riders, wanted horsepower, not heart notes. And the people who actually bought perfume? They were not looking for something wrapped in chrome and faux grit. Sales tanked, fast. It was a branding misfire that taught everyone a lesson. Not every lifestyle can be bottled. The fragrance faded quickly from shelves and memory, leaving behind one important reminder. Just because you can sell something does not mean you should. FUBU meant something. For us, by us. It was not just a tagline, it was a cultural shift. Born from hip-hop and the raw energy of New York City, FUBU was style, identity, and defiance stitched into every piece of fabric. It was for the kids who had never seen themselves in fashion before. And suddenly, there they were, front and center. In the 1990s, everyone wore FUBU. Athletes, rappers, classmates, your cousin who swore he'd make it big. The logos were bold, the lettering was loud, and the message was even louder. Wearing FUBU meant you understood where it came from, and more importantly, who it was for. It was a direct response to being ignored by mainstream fashion for too long, and when LL Cool J dropped that unscripted FUBU shout-out in a Gap commercial, it became the stuff of legend. But then came overexposure. The brand expanded fast, too fast. Department stores flooded their shelves, and the brand's hard-earned authenticity began to blur. As the 2000s arrived, new streetwear labels stepped in, offering fresh voices and cleaner aesthetics. FUBU never truly disappeared, but it faded. For something built on cultural capital, losing relevance was a quiet kind of heartbreak. And still, for those who remember, putting on that FUBU jersey felt like stepping into your own spotlight. No fad is more synonymous with the 1970s than avocado green and harvest gold appliances. Refrigerators, ovens, dishwashers, every kitchen glowed in these earthy tones. Magazines called them warm, welcoming colors, meant to bring nature indoors. Homeowners rushed to redecorate, convinced avocado green was modern chic. But trends change. By the 1980s, people were stuck with giant refrigerators in swamp green, ovens that looked like mustard jars, and dishwashers that clashed with everything. Real estate ads even listed avocado kitchen as a drawback. Families groaned as they lived surrounded by colors that now felt more like punishment than fashion. Kids teased that the appliances looked moldy or rusty. Guests politely pretended it was stylish while secretly hating every shade. And replacing them? Too expensive. So people lived with their avocado nightmares for decades. Eventually, stainless steel and neutral tones took over, leaving harvest gold behind as a punchline. Appliance companies quietly moved on, pretending they had never encouraged the madness. Today, those appliances pop up in vintage kitchens, admired ironically, but remembered bitterly by those who lived with them. Do you remember staring at a green fridge, wondering why anyone thought it looked appetizing? They were weird. That was the best thing about them. Pizza spins were these crunchy little wheels that tasted sort of like pizza, but mostly like processed cheese dust and oregano. They came in a yellow-orange box that looked like it belonged on a toy shelf, not the snack aisle. And for kids in the late 1970s and early 1980s, that was a green light. General Mills knew exactly who they were selling to. It was not about gourmet flavor, it was about novelty. Pizza you could eat with your fingers during cartoons. But novelty only lasts so long. And by the mid-1980s, pizza spins had spun their last. Nobody really knows the exact year they vanished. They just stopped showing up. Other snacks, more refined or more familiar, took their place. Parents began looking at ingredients. School vending machines started banning certain things. Pizza spins were not built for that world. Still, if you ask someone who remembers, their eyes light up. Not because they were good, but because they were ours. A snack that tried something weird, something fun, and did not ask for permission. The world forgot about pizza spins, but the kids who crunched them after school, they remember. Before there were golden arches on every corner, there was Burger Chef. A pioneer in the world of fast food, it once had more locations than McDonald's. Their secret? Innovation. Burger Chef introduced the concept of the combo meal. They had a kids' meal with a toy before Happy Meals even existed. Families loved it. The food was quick, the branding was fun, and the prices were unbeatable. The restaurants had a friendly charm. Low-key places where memories were made over paper-wrapped burgers and crinkle-cut fries. Some even had indoor playgrounds before that was the norm. But while they were busy inventing the future of fast food, McDonald's was perfecting it. Better marketing, better real estate, and a more aggressive expansion strategy slowly buried Burger Chef. Legal battles with McDonald's drained their energy and their pockets. Ownership changed hands, and with it, the identity of the brand. By the early 1980s, most Burger Chef locations were rebranded or closed. What had once been a playground of innovation was now a forgotten building with a different sign out front. And for those who grew up with it, the loss still stings. It was more than a burger. It was the place you begged your parents to stop at. The place with the paper crowns and the magic. Now it is just another fast food footnote. The next failure was worse. A cereal that confused parents, horrified dentists, and made breakfast feel like a bad prank. Frosted Coca-Cola cereal was exactly what it sounds like. Yes, really. In the sugar-soaked chaos of the 1980s, someone decided to turn the most famous soda in the world into a breakfast cereal. And not just a cereal flavored with cola, but a frosted cereal flavored with cola. The pitch was wild. Kids loved soda. Kids loved cereal. Why not combine them? What resulted was a sticky, chemical-tasting disaster that confused everyone who dared to pour milk over it. The cereal smelled like a vending machine. It was never widely distributed and vanished quickly, surviving only in a few advertisements and foggy memories. Today, it stands as one of the strangest food ideas of the decade. But even that did not stop brands from trying to turn fast food into something new. Electric can openers built into countertops were once the pride of high-end kitchen design. They looked sleek, modern, and promised effortless convenience. Just push a button, and your can of peaches or condensed milk opened itself while you leaned back like royalty. But the reality was far messier. They jammed constantly, blades dulled quickly. And when they broke, because they always broke, they were nearly impossible to fix. Built directly into the counter or the cabinet, they could not just be replaced like a handheld model. They became kitchen dead weight. Worse, food splatter would collect in the mechanism, turning it into a breeding ground for grime. People started using them less and less until eventually they forgot they were even there. But for a while, this was the height of kitchen automation. And yet, for a short time, pressing that button felt like living in a house of the future. It felt like progress, even if what you got was a lid half cut and a countertop stained with tomato sauce. In the end, these can openers taught people something important. Just because something looks built in does not mean it should be. At some point, someone decided mirrors did not belong on just the walls of dance studios. They belonged in your living room too. Mirrored walls were supposed to open up small spaces and reflect natural light. What they actually did was double your clutter, amplify fingerprints, and make your guests deeply uncomfortable. People would walk past their own reflections during dinner, trying not to make eye contact with themselves. The idea was chic. The reality was cold, clinical, and impossible to keep clean. What was meant to make your room look bigger ended up making it look busier, messier, and 10 times more high maintenance. And once one mirror cracked or peeled, the illusion of glamour shattered instantly. Every smudge, every streak, every greasy fingerprint stood out like graffiti. If you tried to hang art on them, you ended up with a framing nightmare. And if one cracked, it did not just ruin the wall, it shattered the illusion entirely. Mirrored walls were the visual equivalent of trying too hard, and as it turns out, they were not even the most fragile design feature of the decade. That title belonged to something hiding right above your head. You were not just writing letters in the 1980s. You were sending sensory experiences. Perfumed stationery sets were the peak of pen pal drama. Heart-shaped pages with lace borders, sparkly envelopes, and enough floral scent to knock out a small room. There were sets that smelled like roses, vanilla, ocean breeze, or something suspiciously like bubblegum and detergent. You would open a note from your best friend and nearly pass out from the aroma. It was like the page had bathed in perfume and never toweled off. They were beautiful, romantic, and borderline unreadable. The ink would smudge from the coated paper. The scent would linger for days. And if you tried mailing one of these in the heat, good luck. The envelope might as well have been dipped in cologne. Still, it was all part of the charm. These notes were not meant to last forever. They were moments frozen in scent. They smelled like crushes and sleepovers and secrets told in cursive. But not all nostalgia smells sweet. Imagine a pogo stick and a balance board had a baby, and then forgot to teach it physics. That was the pogo ball, also known as the Lolo ball, and it was one of the hottest toy trends of the 1980s. It looked like a rubber volleyball stuck inside a plastic disc, and the goal was simple: stand on it and bounce. No handlebars, no foot straps, no guidance. Just you, your ankles, and a prayer. The commercials made it look effortless. Kids soaring through the air, spinning in place, landing cleanly like Olympic gymnasts. But in reality, most kids got 3 hops in before face-planting into the pavement. Maybe it was the challenge. Or maybe we just liked pretending we had a shot at being the first pogo ball pro athlete. Either way, the toy quietly disappeared after too many accident-prone afternoons. It went from next big thing to garage sale classic almost overnight. And if that product made no sense, Colorama slide projectors were supposed to make your family photos look like something out of a movie theater. They were huge, clunky, and came with screens big enough to fill a living room wall. This was not your average carousel projector. Coloramas used large format slides and massive bulbs to blast your vacation pictures across the room. Sounds cool until you realize they overheated in minutes, made a ton of noise, and burned through bulbs faster than you could say smile. The upkeep was outrageous. The slides were expensive, fragile, and nearly impossible to store without getting scratched. And sure, Dad might have loved showing off your trip to Niagara Falls on a 10-foot screen, but by the 3rd slide, everyone in the room was bored, hot, and half blind from the glare. The thing is, people were obsessed with gadgets that made them feel like they were living in a sci-fi future. So companies doubled down, pushing even stranger inventions into people's homes. And if you thought a living room projector was extreme, wait until you hear about the car that needed a pilot's license just to turn the ignition. In 1979, Sony unleashed a revolution that fit snugly into the pockets of a generation hungry for mobility: the Walkman. This wasn't just a device, it was a declaration of independence, allowing music to become a personal, portable experience. Suddenly, every walk to school, every bus ride, and every leisurely stroll had a soundtrack. The Walkman didn't just change how we listened to music, it changed where we listened, infusing the mundane with magic. As smartphones and streaming services emerged, the Walkman faded into the background, but not before it had indelibly changed our relationship with music. The legacy of the Walkman lives on in every smartphone's music app, a testament to the era when music first stepped out with us into the wide, wide world. There was a time when TWA meant elegance, a time when stepping onto a Trans-World Airlines flight was like entering a luxury hotel in the sky. The seats were wide, the service crisp, the logo iconic. From movie stars to newlyweds, everyone wanted to fly TWA. It was part of the golden age of air travel. But by the 1970s, the clouds were darkening. Deregulation hit hard. New competitors raced into the skies, offering faster routes and cheaper fares. Fuel prices soared, labor disputes dragged on, and TWA's once glorious reputation began to buckle. What once felt like flying with royalty now felt outdated and expensive. Suddenly, the airline of tomorrow had become yesterday's news. It expanded too quickly, bought too many jets, and could not keep up with the ruthless economics of modern air travel. Bankruptcy became a familiar word. By the time American Airlines absorbed what remained in the early 2000s, the brand was already a shadow. Airports removed the signs, crews traded uniforms, but the memory lingered. For anyone who flew TWA during its heyday, there was nothing like it. Now, it is a name buried under decades of debt and nostalgia, a ghost with wings. The Arch Deluxe was McDonald's way of saying, "Hey adults, fast food can be fancy too." They wanted a premium burger, something with dignity. This was not for kids with Happy Meals. It had a sesame seed bun with a little more flair, lettuce that looked like it came from a farmer's market, and a Dijon mustard sauce that tried so hard to feel gourmet. McDonald's spent more than $100 million to convince Americans this burger was worth growing up for, but no one was buying it. The taste was fine, the look was passable, but the vibe? The vibe was all wrong. People go to McDonald's for speed, convenience, and comfort food, not to feel like they're ordering from a country club snack bar. The Arch Deluxe wanted to be a bridge between fast food and fine dining, but it fell flat somewhere in the middle. It was too expensive for a drive-through indulgence and too familiar to be premium. Kids didn't want it. Adults didn't want it. It was a burger without a home. McDonald's quietly pulled it off the menu, but not before the entire nation saw them try and fail to redefine what a burger should be. It remains one of the most expensive flops in fast food history. Sometimes a burger is just a burger, and no sauce, no matter how grown up, can change that. The Beanie Baby trading market was not just a fad. It was a full-blown cultural fever. Kids were hooked, parents were obsessed, and collectors, they were convinced they had struck gold. These soft, wide-eyed plush toys felt like limited edition lottery tickets in stuffed animal form. Prices skyrocketed. People were keeping them in plastic cases, refusing to let their children play with them. For a while, it really did feel like Beanie Babies were going to fund college tuition. But by the late 1990s, the bubble burst. The market collapsed under its own weight. The internet made it clear supply was not nearly as limited as people believed. What was once worth hundreds of dollars now barely fetched $5 at garage sales. The dream was over, and for many it ended in disappointment and storage bins packed with regret. Beanie Babies were a lesson in hype, herd mentality, and the danger of thinking toys are an investment strategy. They were cute, sure, but they were not gold. And once the magic wore off, they became a soft, cuddly reminder that not everything rare is valuable. JNCO jeans were absolutely wild. You did not wear JNCOs so much as announce them. With legs so wide you could lose a whole lunchbox in there, they were anti-fashion in the loudest way possible. But for a moment in the 1990s, they were everything. They represented rebellion, freedom, and a deep distrust of any adult who said, "You're going out in that?" From skaters to ravers, JNCOs were a badge of honor. They were like walking protest signs against norms, against structure, against anything tight-fitting or preppy. The back pockets were the size of pillowcases, and the stitching often featured fire-breathing skulls or graffiti-style logos. You could spot a JNCO wearer from a block away, and that was the whole point. These jeans were never meant to blend in. They were made to stomp through conformity like a parade. The problem? They were built for a moment, not a movement. As fashion shifted to sleeker silhouettes, nobody wanted to be seen swimming in denim anymore. JNCO tried to relaunch, but the vibe was gone. You cannot manufacture a subculture that no longer exists. What made JNCO work was the chaos. And once the chaos calmed down, so did the desire to wear jeans big enough to parachute with. Still, for a few brief years, if your pants didn't drag across half the street, you were doing it wrong. Before surround sound, there was quadraphonic sound, marketed as the next revolution in home audio. 4 speakers instead of 2, immersive listening, and records designed to blow your mind. Companies promised music would never sound the same again. Audiophiles rushed to buy expensive systems, convinced they were on the cutting edge. But it was confusing. Different brands used different formats, none of them compatible. Records cost a fortune, setups were clunky, and most living rooms had no space for 4 speakers. Instead of revolution, it was chaos. Listeners strained to notice any difference beyond louder. Families argued over wires snaking across carpets. And when records skipped, the whole illusion broke. By the mid-1970s, quadraphonic was dead. Stereo returned as the standard, leaving buyers with overpriced gear no one wanted. Stores cleared shelves, quietly burying the fad. Today, surround sound finally delivers what quadraphonic promised. But back then, it was just hype. Do you remember staring at 4 giant speakers, wondering why it still sounded like a regular record? And for a while in the 1980s, Yoplait custard-style yogurt was the gold standard of dairy indulgence. It was the grown-up snack for moms on the go, for teenagers trying to feel fancy, for anyone who wanted their yogurt to feel special. But then came the health craze. Suddenly, thick meant fattening. Creamy meant guilty. Greek yogurt showed up and changed everything. It was tart. It was authentic. It was better for you, or so we were told. Yoplait tried to pivot, but the custard line got pushed to the back. Eventually, it disappeared altogether. Quietly, like melting dessert. For those who remember, it is a sore spot. The yogurt aisle today is a battlefield of trends and promises, but none of them feel like that little custard cup. Yoplait custard style was indulgent without apology, and maybe that is what killed it. Or maybe we just forgot how to enjoy something simple and rich without feeling bad about it. When people talk about toys from the 1980s, there is always this sparkle in their eye. And more often than not, somewhere in the conversation, the name Coleco comes up. This was the company that gave us the ColecoVision, a game console that dared to dream a little bigger than Atari. But they also brought Cabbage Patch Kids into the mainstream, those little yarn-haired dolls that caused stampedes in department stores. Parents would fight tooth and nail to bring one home. Coleco was riding high, bursting into every American living room like it owned the place. But that was the problem. It tried to own too much. Flush with success, Coleco expanded fast. Too fast. They took on the Atom computer, a disaster of a product that lost them millions. The tech was rushed, the marketing confused, and suddenly they were bleeding cash. Meanwhile, Nintendo was coming in hot with the NES, and Coleco could not keep up. By the mid-1980s, it was over. Bankruptcy followed, and the name faded into memory. But for a moment, Coleco was everywhere. On our shelves, in our commercials, at the center of our holiday wish lists. It was a name that felt like it would always matter. Now, most people do not even remember what Coleco stood for. It is strange how a brand can go from a household name to a trivia question in just a few years. You could smell the sizzling fajitas before you even walked in the door. Heinz EZ Squirt Ketchup is mostly remembered for the neon green and purple bottles from the early 2000s, but the chaos actually started much earlier, in the 1980s, with a quietly released prototype that never saw wide shelves. It was ketchup, but it was not red. It came in a squeezable bottle, meant to make mealtime fun. And the color? Slightly orange, leaning into a plasticky red that looked more like school glue dyed with food coloring than anything you'd put on a French fry. It confused kids. It repelled adults. The flavor was supposed to be the same, but something about the color made every bite taste off. Parents were not amused. The bottle clogged, the texture was runny, and the marketing push never landed. Heinz quietly pulled the prototype, only to repackage the failure in new colors years later, this time with a full campaign. But even then, the idea never stuck for long. Ketchup, it turns out, is one of those foods people do not want to mess with. The Amana Raider range was a beast in every sense of the word. It was massive, expensive, and powerful enough to feel like you were cooking with radiation, which, technically, you were. When it debuted, it felt like something out of a science fiction movie. No more ovens, no more waiting. Just press a button and zap, dinner was served. Except that zap came with confusion, trial and error, and the occasional ruined meal. The Radar range was intimidating. It hummed like a generator and took up half the kitchen counter. Instruction manuals were thick, filled with warnings, and nobody quite knew how long to cook anything. Meat cooked unevenly, soup boiled over, and forget about metal, one spark, and you felt like you had summoned lightning. Still, people marveled at it. It was the future after all, even if it scared them a little. Eventually, sleeker, quieter, and more user-friendly models took over, but those early Radar ranges left their mark. They were not just appliances, they were conversation starters. They proved that Americans were willing to put up with a lot in the name of progress. Today, we take microwave convenience for granted, but back then, you had to earn it, with nerves of steel and a manual always nearby. If you lived through the 1970s, you remember the feel of it between your toes. Shag carpeting was more than a design choice, it was a movement. Bold colors, thick fibers, and the kind of plush softness that made you want to lie down and never get up. From mustard yellows to burnt oranges, it blanketed floors in every room, including bathrooms, which is an idea no one has really been able to explain. Shag was fun and funky, but it was also a magnet for everything you never wanted in your house. Dust, dirt, pet hair, smells, and once it was in there, it stayed. Vacuuming was a chore. Deep cleaning was a nightmare. The very feature that made shag carpets so appealing, its thick, luxurious texture, was exactly what made it impossible to clean. People were not just pulling it up for new trends, they were trying to reclaim their air quality. What started as a symbol of comfort quickly became a maintenance disaster. Eventually, people tore it up in favor of cleaner, sleeker options. Shag rugs might have made a small comeback, but the wall-to-wall version? It is staying in the past, where it belongs. Of course, nothing trapped dust or the mood of a dark, cramped house quite like what was hanging on the walls. Do you remember the sweet-smelling school supply that never actually worked? Let us talk about rubber-scented erasers shaped like food. You knew it was going to be a good school year when your pencil case smelled like a fruit salad. Rubber-scented erasers shaped like food were the peak of academic excitement in the 1980s. They looked like tiny hamburgers, donuts, pickles, even sushi rolls. If you were lucky, your set came with a tiny tray and a fake soda. They were bright, colorful, and smelled like someone spilled a bottle of air freshener in an art supply store. Only problem? They did not actually erase anything. If anything, they left behind more streaks than they removed. Still, no one really used them. You displayed them, you traded them, you clutched them like they were gold. And every now and then, someone tried to eat one just to see what would happen. It was childhood logic at its finest. If it smells like a strawberry milkshake, it must taste like one too, right? Wrong. But what these erasers lacked in function, they made up for in flair. They were tiny scented trophies of your youth. And while they never helped you pass math, they sure looked good on your desk. Speaking of things that looked great on the surface but did not last, let us hit play on a sound that defined a decade and then disappeared overnight. Max Headroom was supposed to be the future, a computer-generated, sarcastic television host who stuttered stylishly and wore sunglasses at night. He was the face of a dystopian digital world, equal parts cyberpunk icon and artificial intelligence with an attitude. Advertisers loved him, especially soda companies, so someone had the bright idea, let us give him a full television series. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. The Max Headroom show was visually interesting but narratively confusing. It tried to blend science fiction with satire, wrapped in glitchy editing and background noise. Most of the time, you were not sure if the show was broken or just being artsy. The plotline featured underground hackers, corrupt corporations, and a bleak media landscape, which ironically kind of predicted the internet. And Max, once a futuristic face of advertising, became more of a trivia answer at bar night. Still, his influence stuck around in weird ways. You can spot traces of Max Headroom in everything from video game villains to pop music videos. And if you thought that was sensory overload, down. But as it turns out, even that was not so simple. Enter the early Motorola pager. The idea was amazing. A small device you could clip to your belt, and when someone needed you, it would beep. Revolutionary, except it barely worked. The first commercial pagers rolled out in the early 1960s, and they were supposed to change everything. But the range was horrible. In most cities, they only worked in a few downtown zones. If you stepped too far outside, say goodbye to your connection. Not to mention, these early pagers were clunky little bricks with antennas sticking out and batteries that drained faster than a flashlight on Halloween. Oh, and the signal was only one way. You got a page, but you could not respond unless you found a payphone. So really, you were just being told to go call someone urgently without any context. In hospitals or offices, it sort of made sense. But for everyday people, it was just a noisy gadget that told you nothing and helped even less. Still, it laid the groundwork for communication on the go. But speaking of on the go, the typewriter, with its rhythmic tap-tap and the ceremonial ding at the end of a line, was the soul of written communication. From Mark Twain to the Beat Poets, it was the instrument of choice for crafting narratives. The introduction of electric models, like the IBM Selectric in the 20th century, was akin to moving from a horse-drawn carriage to a sleek automobile. Yet, the dawn of personal computing in the late 20th century gently ushered this stalwart into the shadows. Still, the typewriter remains a symbol of creativity and nostalgia, cherished by those who yearn for the tangible imprint of ink on paper. Woolco was supposed to be the next evolution of Woolworths. It had the size of a department store and the soul of a five and dime. Launched in the 1960s and booming into the 1970s, Woolco promised everything in one place: clothes, toys, appliances, groceries. For families used to making a dozen different stops, it felt like magic. A bright red sign that said you could get it all without going broke. But behind that promise was chaos. Poor inventory systems, outdated layouts, stores too big to manage and too cluttered to navigate. And then came the competition. Kmart, Target, Walmart. Retail giants with cleaner shelves, sharper prices, and better supply chains. Woolco could not keep up. It became the store you only visited when you had to. The store where the lights buzzed too loud and the shelves were always half empty. By the 1980s, most Woolcos had either been shut down or sold off. Some were turned into malls, others just disappeared. And with them went a small piece of how we used to shop, wandering the aisles on Saturday mornings, dreaming about toys, picking out socks with mom. Woolco was not perfect, but it was familiar, and we miss it more than we admit. Zima was what happened when someone tried to make beer but decided to dress it in nightclub lighting and call it sophisticated. Born in the age of frosted tips and plastic chokers, Zima was a clear malt beverage that promised to be different. And different it was. It looked like fancy water, tasted like soda trying to be cool, and had the branding of a rejected boy band. The commercials were slick and edgy, targeting 20-somethings who were too hip for beer but too broke for cocktails. But the taste? That strange, citrusy, chemical aftertaste lingered longer than it should have. People tried to like it. Really. It became the ironic drink of choice at parties for a little while. But deep down, everyone knew this was not going to last. Zima did not fit anywhere. It was not beer. It was not a wine cooler. It was just there. Like someone showed up to the party in a tuxedo and flip-flops. Sales dropped off fast. By the late 1990s, Zima was being phased out, replaced by actual drinks people enjoyed. It made a brief comeback in the 2010s for nostalgia's sake, but even then, the reaction was mostly laughter. Zima wanted to be the drink of the future. Instead, it became the joke of the past. Sweaters were loud, bright, colorful, and for a moment they were everything. Made famous by hip-hop legends like the Notorious B.I.G., these kaleidoscopic knit sweaters became a status symbol in the early 1990s. You could not miss them. They were like walking pieces of abstract art. And for a short while, they were everywhere. Magazines, music videos, and album covers. But the fad burned hot and fast. The patterns were bold, but hard to wear. Fashion trends moved on. And pretty soon, what was once fresh started to feel like overkill. By the late 1990s, Coogie sweaters had disappeared from closets and street corners, replaced by sleeker, more minimalist styles. The brand tried to make comebacks, but the magic never returned. Maybe it was too much color? Maybe it was the wrong time? Or maybe Coogie was just one of those things that was always destined to be a snapshot of one specific moment in fashion history. Either way, it left as loudly as it arrived. The Blockbuster Video was not just a store, it was the weekend plan. Friday nights meant neon lighting, rows of tapes, and the quiet excitement of choosing the right movie to keep the family entertained for hours. There was nothing quite like the feel of that plastic clamshell in your hand, or the thrill of spotting the just-returned cart before anyone else. But that world vanished fast. In the early 2000s, while Blockbuster executives were busy doubling down on late fees, a tiny upstart named Netflix was quietly mailing DVDs with no deadlines. By the time Blockbuster tried to play catch-up, streaming had already flipped the game. It was not just a business mistake, it was a cultural blind spot. Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix and passed. Imagine that. The very brand that had defined entertainment for a generation fell behind because it forgot to look ahead. There was something about the blue and yellow glow of a blockbuster sign that made any town feel a little more alive. But in the end, it became a relic, frozen in time like the movies it once carried. And now, a whole generation will grow up never knowing the magic of wandering those aisles. Roller rinks were already a fever dream of disco lights and loud music, but the 1970s decided kids needed to look the part too. Enter the disco roller outfits, shiny polyester jumpsuits, often in metallic colors with glittery belts or sequins. Kids twirled on the rink floor looking like tiny backup dancers for Donna Summer. Ads pitched them as the height of roller chic. The problem? Polyester does not breathe. After 2 laps, kids were drenched, sweat glued fabric to their skin, and glitter rubbed off on everything. Parents tried to peel jumpsuits off crying kids like plastic wrap. And worse, polyester was flammable, a hazard when kids blew out birthday candles in their flashy outfits. Still, for the brief moment before exhaustion, kids felt like stars. Families snapped photos of glowing rinks filled with mini disco dancers in rainbow outfits. But once reality hit, those outfits ended up at the bottom of closets, never worn again. Manufacturers moved on quickly, realizing no parent wanted to spend money on clothes that doubled as a sauna. Roller skating itself stayed cool, but the glittery jumpsuit fad failed miserably. Today, those photos survive as hilarious reminders of how fashion tortured kids in the name of fun. Do you remember skating in a polyester suit, praying no one saw the sweat stains spreading under the lights? Peanut butter fans thought they had found heaven. PB Max was chunky, messy, and unapologetically loud. A thick slab of peanut butter on a cookie base, all drenched in milk chocolate. It had all the makings of a legend. And for a short while in the late 1980s and early 1990s, it was just that. You would see it in gas stations, in vending machines, in your friend's lunch. It stood out from the crowd. It tasted like rebellion. But then, like a cruel trick, PB Max disappeared. People wrote letters, sent complaints, asked where it went. The answer? Mars executives apparently just did not like peanut butter. That was it. That was the reason. The product was successful, profitable, and beloved. But it did not match the personal taste of the family behind the company. So they pulled the plug, just like that. No announcement, no farewell tour, just silence. It is the kind of decision that makes you realize how fragile even your favorites are. PB Max did not fail because people stopped loving it. It failed because someone decided it did not deserve to exist. And in that, there is something deeply upsetting. A snack that won hearts, but not boardrooms. Chi-Chi's was not just a restaurant, it was an event. Tex-Mex was still new to most American towns, and Chi-Chi's made it feel like a party every time. Bright colors, huge plates, and that signature fried ice cream made it a destination for birthdays, anniversaries, or just a break from the usual. It was the first introduction many people had to things like chimichangas and salsa that came in jars. But behind the scenes, Chi-Chi's was a ticking time bomb. The rapid expansion across the United States meant quality slipped. Food prep got sloppy. And then the worst-case scenario, an outbreak of hepatitis A tied to contaminated green onions in one of its restaurants. It killed 4 people and sickened hundreds. The trust was gone. No birthday song could bring it back. Lawsuits piled up. Chi-Chi's tried to rebrand, but the damage was irreversible. By the early 2000s, its last American location had closed. It was heartbreaking for those who grew up with it. A place where memories were made, now just another abandoned lot. The name still lives on in some frozen food aisles, but it is not the same. The party was over, and it ended in silence. Lifesavers. Holes were marketed as the answer to a question nobody asked. What if we sold the center of a lifesaver as its own candy? They came in tiny plastic flip-top containers and were basically just little spheres of compressed sugar. Same flavors, same colors, just no ring. But the novelty wore off fast. They were too small to enjoy one at a time and too hard to chew as a handful. Worst of all, they were a choking hazard. The irony? Lifesavers were originally designed with a hole to prevent choking. The Centers for Disease Control issued safety concerns, and stories spread about children struggling with the candy. The brand pulled them from shelves quietly, but the damage was done. What was meant to be clever and fun became a cautionary tale. Today, Lifesavers holes are remembered not for flavor, but for failure, a rare misstep from an otherwise beloved candy. Combination washer-dryer units sounded like the answer to every homemaker's prayers. One machine, one cycle, dirty to dry without needing to transfer a thing. It was the kind of solution that made magazine covers and won over appliance showrooms. But in practice, it was a whole different story. These early units were unreliable, took ages to run a full load, and often left clothes damp or steaming but not quite dry. Worse, if the washer broke, you lost your dryer too, and vice versa. Repairs were tricky, parts were rare, and service calls were expensive. Households quickly learned the hard truth. Just because two things can be combined does not mean they should be. Still, in a post-war world obsessed with space saving and streamlining, these machines symbolized a sleek, modern lifestyle. Apartment dwellers in particular clung to the dream, grateful for anything that spared them the laundromat. But frustration set in fast. Eventually, many people went back to the old two-machine method, realizing that reliability beat innovation every time. The combo washer-dryer promised convenience, but delivered compromise. And while today's versions are far more efficient, those early units left a damp impression on everyone who owned one. Popcorn ceilings were everywhere, and you did not think twice about them until one started flaking into your cereal. Created as an easy solution for soundproofing and hiding imperfections, these textured ceilings were sprayed on like cheap whipped cream, giving homes a bumpy, cratered look that no one questioned until they started falling apart. Vacuuming the ceiling became an actual task in some households, and painting over them was a test of endurance and futility. But the real danger was deeper than dust. Many popcorn ceilings contained asbestos, a now-banned toxic material that can cause serious health issues. Once people found out, the ceiling went from being just ugly to outright terrifying. Suddenly, every flake falling from above felt like a silent threat you could not ignore. That meant removing them was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous and expensive. Families who had lived under them for years were suddenly advised to bring in professionals just to make their homes safe again. Something meant to be invisible became the most threatening part of the room. And the disasters did not stop there. Just take a look under your feet. The video disc player, specifically RCA's capacitance electronic disc, or CED for short, except we are not using abbreviations here, so let us just call it what it was. A huge plastic record that you shoved into a machine in hopes of watching a movie. It looked like vinyl, but it definitely was not groovy. You needed a special player, the discs were fragile, and rewinding? Not happening. It was like asking your television to do a ballet recital while wearing hiking boots. It launched in the early 1980s and flopped so hard that even RCA, the company behind it, backed out just a few years later. People already had VHS tapes. They had beta tapes. Nobody asked for a third format that looked like a frisbee and handled like a toddler on a sugar rush. Sure, the packaging was cool, but it was a disaster in living rooms. It took up space and made too much noise, and not the good kind. This thing had all the flash and none of the function. But if you thought that was loud, wait until you see what came down the slopes wearing a highlighter. It looked like something straight out of a haunted dollhouse and somehow got greenlit as a beauty product. The Rejuvenique face mask promised younger, firmer skin through electrical muscle stimulation, which is a fancy way of saying it zapped your face with little shocks. Advertised by a former soap opera star, the mask wrapped around your head like a plastic exoskeleton and turned your facial routine into something that felt like a scene from a horror film. The idea was that the stimulation would tone your face like a gym tones your body, but customers mostly reported mild burns, numbness, and the distinct feeling that they had made a terrible mistake. Despite airing on television with the enthusiasm of a late-night miracle cure, it flopped hard. It was the kind of product that felt less like a beauty tool and more like a sci-fi movie prop that somehow escaped the set. Still, you had to admire the ambition. If you could survive the Rejuvenique, surely you could survive anything the 1980s had to throw at you. And as it turns out, that next throw was straight at the kids, because someone thought gym fashion should start in elementary school. Philco Predicta. You remember that thing? That television set with the spinning head and the see-through shell that looked like it belonged in a Jetsons episode. It debuted in the late 1950s, but the last run of models pushed into the early 1960s, and by then it had one foot out the door. See, people bought the Predicta for the design. The space-age look, the swivel screen, the way it could sit on a pole or wall mount. It was a vibe. But what they got? Tubes that burned out constantly, finicky knobs, and a screen that would sometimes go blank just for the fun of it. Philco's idea was ahead of its time, no doubt. But it turns out no one really wants their television to look cool if it can barely hold a signal. Repair guys hated them. Parts were a nightmare. And while collectors might treasure them today, back then the Predicta's final models flopped so hard they helped tank the company. But hey, if your television... Imagine a time when the centerpiece of every living room was a bulky, boxy behemoth, the CRT TV. Coming into prominence in the 1950s, this technological marvel turned the humble living room into a bustling family theater. Picture the excitement as families gathered around to watch the moon landing or the latest episode of I Love Lucy. Despite its hefty frame, the CRT TV was the window to the world until the sleek and slender flat screens of the early 2000s gently nudged it into the annals of history. Yet, ask any vintage video game enthusiast, and they'll wax poetic about the unmatched charm of playing on a CRT. Before streaming in HD, the CRT TV was the family's bond, the newsbringer, and the entertainer, all rolled into one. Braniff International Airways was not just an airline. It was a fashion show in the sky, a flying work of art with orange planes, purple interiors, and flight attendants dressed by Halston. It was the kind of thing only the 1970s could dream up, and only the 1970s could destroy. It started with color and glamour. People felt like royalty walking onto a Braniff jet, but underneath the paint and press photos was a brutal truth. The airline industry was changing. Gas prices were soaring. Deregulation was coming. Braniff spent money like it was printing it, buying more jets, building grander lounges, and betting big on routes it could not afford. When the economy crashed and fuel costs doubled, Braniff found itself choking on luxury. Passengers stopped flying for style. They wanted cheap. They wanted direct. They wanted reliable. Braniff had become a symbol of excess in a decade no longer willing to pay for it. By the time it folded in 1982, people barely blinked. The planes were grounded, the bright colors faded, and the dream of glamorous air travel took one final nosedive. Ask anyone who flew Braniff in its prime. They will smile, maybe even tear up. Then they will tell you it never stood a chance. Surge was Coca-Cola's answer to Mountain Dew, and it came screaming out of the 1990s like a skateboard made of neon lightning. It was loud, bright green, and packed with sugar and caffeine. Marketed to extreme teens doing extreme sports, it wanted to be the drink that fueled your inner rebel. The ads had people jumping off rooftops and yelling about adrenaline. But the flavor? A citrusy punch to the face followed by a sugary afterburn. For some, that was perfect. For most, it was too much. Parents hated it. Schools banned it. And once the energy drink wave hit in the 2000s, Surge just seemed kind of childish. Sales dipped, then plummeted. Coca-Cola pulled it from shelves before the decade ended. It had a brief comeback in the 2010s thanks to online petitions, but the magic never returned. Surge was a relic from a time when everything was extreme, in all caps. It tried to be a lifestyle, but it turned out to be just a drink, and not a great one. New Coke 2, also known as Coca-Cola OK, was a sequel that absolutely nobody asked for. After the infamous failure of New Coke in the 1980s, You would think Coca-Cola would have learned their lesson. But in the 1990s, they gave it another shot, convinced that a rebrand could make lightning strike twice. It did not. Coca-Cola OK was basically regular Coke with a slightly different formula, but it was packaged like a marketing intern's fever dream. The branding felt forced, the commercials were forgettable, and consumers? They were not impressed. It was less about flavor and more about confusion. Coca-Cola fans had already been through the emotional roller coaster of New Coke once. They were not about to be fooled again. And so, Coca-Cola OK became the soda aisle equivalent of a shrug. It came, it went, and almost no one noticed. Looking back, it feels like the kind of product that only exists so people can say, wait, was that real? The answer is yes. It was real, and it was a real failure. Kool-Aid bursts were childhood in a bottle. You know the ones. Squeezable, loud-colored, with a twist top that never quite came off right. They were perfect for lunchboxes and summer days, even if your parents were always suspicious of what was actually in them. But kids did not care. It was sweet, it was fun, and it was yours. There was something magical about drinking straight from a bottle that looked like a science experiment. The flavors were wild, the colors even wilder, and somehow that made it taste better. You'd trade them on the playground like currency, and every sticky drop felt like summer vacation bottled up. In the 1990s, Kool-Aid bursts were the party starter. But over time, the world got more health conscious. Sugar got demonized. Parents started reading labels. And suddenly, brightly dyed corn syrup with a splash of fruit flavor wasn't so welcome anymore. The brand kept tweaking the formula, but it never recaptured the old buzz. The squeeze bottle ended up as a curiosity, something you remembered, not something you bought. And just like that, the Kool-Aid man found fewer walls to crash through. Inflatable furniture looked futuristic in the 1970s. Clear couches, chairs, even beds filled with air promised a hip, modern vibe for cheap. Magazines praised them as portable, stylish, and perfect for dorm rooms or groovy apartments. They seemed like the perfect blend of design and affordability. The reality was less glamorous. Sitting down made loud squeaks, every movement stuck sweaty skin to plastic, and one wrong step sent you crashing to the floor. Air pumps broke, seams ripped, and patches failed. Within weeks, your modern lounge was a flat puddle of vinyl. Kids loved bouncing on them, turning them into makeshift trampolines until they burst. Parents hated them, calling them junk that cluttered living rooms. Yet for a moment, inflatable furniture felt like you owned a piece of the future. Eventually, practicality won. Nobody wanted to constantly patch holes or replace furniture that could not handle a cat's claw. By the end of the decade, inflatable furniture was more joke than innovation. Today, it pops up at novelty shops, but mostly as a gag gift. Do you remember sinking into a squeaky plastic couch, pretending it was comfortable while sweat glued you in place? Fruit roll-ups were weird. Pudding roll-ups were weirder. A strip of chocolate pudding in the same sticky, peelable format. Kids were intrigued. Parents were confused. It looked like candy but was marketed as a snack. Texture-wise, it lived somewhere between fruit leather and Play-Doh, and that might be why it failed. Still, for a few brief years in the late 1980s, it became a bizarre staple in school lunches. You could find it in trade deals between Lunchables and juice boxes, but it never caught on the way fruit roll-ups did. People just did not know what to make of it. Was it dessert? Was it healthy? The packaging could not decide either. Eventually, it vanished, discontinued quietly like a secret never meant to be shared. You might think you imagined it, but no, it was real. The problem was, nobody knew how to explain it, not even Betty Crocker. And in a world obsessed with convenience and clarity, that was enough to get you pulled from shelves. Pudding roll-ups were too odd to survive. But for those who remember, they live on as proof that companies once took strange, delicious risks. And sometimes that was enough. Do you remember when flying felt like something out of a movie? Pan American World Airways, or Pan Am, was not just a way to get from one place to another. It was an experience, one you dressed up for, one that made you feel like the world was opening up. Their blue logo was instantly recognizable, their stewardesses were style icons, and their international routes were unmatched. It was the airline that brought jet-setting into American vocabulary. But behind the glamour, things were starting to slip. Rising fuel costs, government deregulation, and one financial misstep after another slowly chipped away at what was once an empire in the sky. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Pan Am was on life support. Even a last-ditch attempt to rebrand with a new focus on affordability could not save it. The 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, was a final blow, emotional, financial, and reputational. The company folded not long after, its assets scattered, its story over. For many, it marked the end of an era. Today, people still look at old Pan Am ads and ticket stubs and feel something. Not just nostalgia, but loss. We thought it would always be there, gliding above the clouds, reminding us of what travel could be. And then, suddenly, it wasn't. The next idea came from a chain that was already famous, Pizza Hut, and they tried to go deep, thick, and Italian. It did not go well. The Piazza from Pizza Hut was supposed to be a revelation, a deep dish, multi-layered Italian pie that combined all the decadence of lasagna with the branding power of pizza. Launched in the mid-1980s with television ads that felt more like opera promos than food commercials, the Piazza came in a few varieties and was stuffed with layer upon layer of cheese, meats, and sauce. It took extra time to cook. It took extra time to eat. And it took very little time for customers to get tired of it. It was expensive for its time, hard to prep, and nearly impossible to deliver without becoming a mess. Pizza Hut quietly retired it, and today it lives on only through retro commercials and the rare person who insists it was underrated. But while the Piazza failed by doing too much, the built-in wall coffee makers were supposed to be the final word in kitchen luxury. The idea was elegant, coffee at the press of a button, no more clutter on the countertop, no more messy grounds. They were sleek, space-saving, and made your kitchen feel like the inside of a first-class airplane. But once installed, reality came knocking. They leaked, they gurgled, they brewed lukewarm, watery coffee that tasted like disappointment. Cleaning them was a nightmare. The water reservoirs were hidden deep inside cabinetry, and mildew quickly became an uninvited guest. Repairing them meant calling in a specialist, an expensive proposition for a cup of bitter drip. Yet people were enchanted by the idea. They proudly showed off their built-in marvels to guests, even as they quietly brewed their actual coffee in a countertop machine out of sight. Over time, these units became silent relics in otherwise modern kitchens. Some still sit in old houses today, yellowed by age, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and outdated hope. They were supposed to make mornings better. Instead, they taught people to be careful what they wished for, because nothing is worse than needing coffee and being betrayed by the very machine you trusted to deliver it. Paneling was everywhere in the 1970s. It made your living room look like a den, your den looked like a hunting lodge, and your basement looked like a forgotten back room at a roadside bar. At first, it felt warm and cozy. Rich brown tones, faux wood grain, maybe even a little glossy finish if you were lucky. But there was a problem. Most of it was not real wood. It was thin, pressed panels with a printed veneer. It dented easily, warped when damp, and turned rooms into narrow, lightless boxes. The illusion of natural wood faded fast when corners started peeling and warping with moisture. What was meant to bring a rustic touch ended up feeling cheap and oppressive. Once a sign of stylish Americana, it aged into a symbol of dated taste. The worst part? You could not just paint over it. People spent entire weekends trying to rip the stuff down or cover it with drywall. Today, retro renovators might leave a single accent wall for nostalgia, but most of us remember wood paneling for what it truly was: fake, dark, and way too committed to its own aesthetic. And when the walls started closing in, families turned to high-tech solutions to feel connected inside the home. Unfortunately, those did not age much better. Because the next 1980s trend? It came with a can of hairspray, a comb, and enough height to qualify as a fire hazard. There are hairstyles, and then there are structural engineering projects. Gravity-defying bangs, held aloft by industrial-strength hairspray, were the crown jewels of 1980s style. We are talking sky-high, shellacked to perfection, immovable bangs that could survive a hurricane. You did not just style your hair, you sculpted it. And the glue that held it all together? A can of Aquanet, the unofficial perfume of the decade. One spritz was never enough. You held that button down until the room filled with fog and your lungs begged for mercy. It was how you knew your bangs were officially done. They had to crunch when you tapped them. These bangs had volume, attitude, and possibly their own zip code. They required teasing, patience, and a total disregard for the ozone layer. Parents disapproved. Schools banned combs in lockers. But if your bangs did not touch the ceiling of your school photo backdrop, were you even living? It was extreme, it was ridiculous, and it was glorious. But eventually, the sky-high trend lost steam, and pastel blazers tried to take over the fashion throne. Spoiler alert, not everyone could pull off Crockett from Miami Vice. Talk about the time Atari thought your forehead could play video games. The Atari MindLink sounds like something a supervillain would use to take over the world, but in reality, it was a headband, a plastic one, that claimed to read your thoughts and turn them into in-game controls. The promise was simple: no hands, no controllers, just your mind. And that promise immediately hit a brick wall called 1980s science. The MindLink was supposed to pick up electrical signals from your forehead muscles and translate them into commands. In practice, that meant you had to clench and twitch your brow in weird ways to move a pixel around the screen. The truth was that the MindLink was way ahead of its time, and not in a good way. It launched into testing and was quickly shelved when even Atari realized nobody wanted to win Space Invaders with their eyebrows. Maybe it would have worked better as a meditation trainer or a fancy headache inducer. Either way, the MindLink was canceled before it ever hit store shelves, and thank goodness, because if it had gone mainstream, we might all be sitting in silence, furrowing our brows to check email. Now let us move from mind control to media meltdown with a television icon who could not quite make the jump from cool to coherent. So imagine this. It is 1961, and you are cruising down the road in what looks like a spaceship on two wheels. That was the dream Ford tried to sell with the Gyron. It was a futuristic concept car that did away with four wheels entirely. Instead, it balanced on just two, using a gyroscope, yes, like the kind in science fiction movies. There were no pedals, no steering wheel, and barely any chance you would be able to drive it. But man, did it look cool. The body was sleek, all sharp angles and bubble domes, and it screamed speed even though it never actually hit the highway. Ford hyped it up big at car shows, but behind the curtains everyone knew it was all show and no go. The technology just was not there. The gyroscope was hard to manage, and the car itself was so unstable it needed little kickstands when parked. It never made it past the showroom floor. The original prototype? Destroyed in a fire. The Gyron did not just fail, it vanished. But that did not stop companies from continuing their obsession with the future. In fact, the very next year, one of them tried to bring the future into your living room. You just needed an extra $1,000 and a lot of patience. In the 1950s, music found its wings with the transistor radio, transforming beaches into personal concert venues where friends gathered, basking under the sun while top 40 tunes played, a soundtrack to youthful summers. This small device brought melodies and voices not just into homes, but into open spaces, making the world feel a touch smaller, fitting snugly into one's hand. Inventors like William Shockley gave us a tool that connected us to the outer world in a manner both intimate and expansive. The radio delivered music, news, and live sports with a static crackle, adding a layer of authenticity to every broadcast. Despite the digital age, radio's essence survives, transformed yet enduring, a testament to its role as the soundtrack of the 20th century. High karate aftershave was a joke and a phenomenon all at once. It came in a cheap bottle with a commercial that turned masculinity into a parody of itself. Spray this on, and women would attack you. Literally. The ads were absurd, over the top, and completely unforgettable. But behind the humor was a surprisingly decent scent. High Karate became the go-to for teenage boys trying to smell grown-up and grown men trying to stay playful. It was the cologne you found in your dad's drawer next to the tie clips and old movie stubs. But the joke wore thin. Trends shifted. The 1980s wanted power and polish, not camp and chaos. High Karate was quietly discontinued. Stores stopped stocking it. The bottles became rare. Today, it is a punchline for some and a scent memory for others. A whiff of what it meant to be young, to be bold, to believe that a fragrance could change everything. Crystal Pepsi was Pepsi's bold experiment to reinvent cola by removing everything that made it look like cola. The concept was genius on paper. Crystal clear soda with that familiar cola taste. It promised something futuristic, pure, and exciting, but instead delivered something confusing. When people took their first sip, they did not taste the future. They tasted cola that had been left out too long in a sunlit room. The marketing had gone all in, television ads with Van Halen's "Right Now" blasting in the background, sleek glass bottles, and a clean science lab aesthetic. But none of that could change the fact that the flavor was just off. It was like your taste buds were expecting a party and got a PowerPoint presentation instead. Consumers did not know what to do with it. Was it a health soda? Was it supposed to be a new lifestyle? Why fix something that was never broken? That confusion was its downfall. Within 2 years, it was gone from shelves, never to be seen again, except in retro countdowns like this one. Some people still remember the taste, others only remember the disappointment. Crystal Pepsi wasn't just a product, it was a moment. A clear window into what happens when branding gets too clever for its own good. It tried to give us something new, but sometimes clarity is overrated. Snackwell's fat-free cookies were America's favorite lie in the 1990s. If you were alive during that time, chances are you ate a whole box and felt good about it. After all, they were fat-free, right? That meant healthy, right? Wrong! Snackwell's tapped into the low-fat craze that swept through kitchens and grocery aisles like a health-conscious tornado, but what they left out in fat, they made up for in sugar. A lot of sugar. People thought they were snacking smarter, but they were just trading one problem for another. These cookies were soft, gooey, and dangerously addictive. And because the label said fat-free, people ate them like vegetables. It was snack marketing genius and a nutritional disaster. Eventually, the truth came out. Health experts rang the alarms. The public caught on. Sales plummeted. And Snackwell's went from a pantry must-have to a cautionary tale. The green box is still around in some form, but the original craze? That is long gone. It was a sweet illusion, built on the back of a health trend that never really made sense. But for a few short years, those cookies made America feel better about making the same old mistakes. America Online CDs were absolutely everywhere. Mailboxes, cereal boxes, even stuck inside magazines. They were impossible to escape. They promised a brand new future right at your fingertips with just a phone line and a bit of patience. And if you ever heard the dial-up tone, you already know it burned itself into your brain. America Online, or AOL, was the digital front porch of the 1990s. It gave millions their first email address, their first chat room crush, their first viral chain letter. And then, just like that, it started fading. Broadband showed up, and AOL's clunky all-in-one model could not keep up. The CDs kept coming for a while, but it was like shouting into a void. Eventually, they became a joke, something you'd turn into coasters or hang from your rearview mirror. AOL had built the bridge into the internet age, but it forgot to cross it. For a moment in time, though, it felt like the future was stamped onto every disk. Logging into AOL was not just about getting online. It was stepping into an entirely new world. And now, all that's left is the sound of 1,000 modems connecting. One last time. Few fads screamed 1970s louder than the custom van craze. Vans became rolling canvases of expression, painted with wizards, lightning bolts, or sunsets. Interiors decked out with shag carpets, bead curtains, and yes, sometimes lava lamps glued to the dashboard. It was freedom on four wheels, marketed as the ultimate hangout spot for young dreamers. The truth? They were ovens on wheels. In summer heat, shag carpeting smelled like wet dog, vinyl seats stuck to your thighs, and all that extra junk rattled non-stop. Lava lamps tipped over, leaving goo smeared on the dashboard. And the fuzzy dice? They blocked more vision than they decorated. Gas shortages and practicality finally killed the craze. Nobody wanted to haul a van that guzzled gallons of fuel just to look like a mobile rec room. By the 1980s, most vans returned to being utility vehicles, stripped of their wizard murals and shag walls. Today, surviving custom vans are collector novelties, but for many, they remain a sweaty memory of excess. Do you remember sliding open a van door, greeted by wall-to-wall carpet and the smell of burnt vinyl in the summer sun? There was nothing quiet about the way Quisp cereal burst into childhood. Its electric pink box and the little alien mascot with a propeller on his head felt like Saturday morning wrapped in sugar. The cereal was sweet, corn-based, and shaped like flying saucers, a perfect match for its intergalactic branding. In the 1980s, this was not just food, it was an identity. It lived next to action figures, cartoons, and color TV. But as tastes shifted, Quisp began losing its ground. Its twin cereal rival Quake had already disappeared earlier, and Quisp slowly followed, becoming harder to find. The cereal aisle was transforming. Health trends, fancier brands, and less sugary options muscled out the weird and wonderful. Kids grew up, the mascot faded, and Post stopped pushing it. The strange part is, Quisp never officially died. It would reappear in limited batches or online like a ghost from a breakfast past. But by the time the world logged on, Quisp had already been forgotten by most. You would be hard-pressed to find a younger millennial who even knows what it tasted like. For a cereal that once claimed to be the quasi-energy cereal, Quisp's quiet fade-out is almost too poetic. A sugar-fueled dream, lost to time and trend. Intellivision had ambition. Released by Mattel in the early 1980s, it was not just a gaming console, it was a challenge to Atari. With better graphics, a full numeric controller, and a library of games that felt just a little smarter, Intellivision made a strong first impression. For a moment, it looked like it could win. The advertising war was fierce. They even ran ads comparing their system directly to Atari's, pointing out every technical shortcoming. But then came the crash. In 1983, the video game market collapsed. Oversaturation, poor quality control, and waning interest left the industry in shambles. Mattel, unprepared for the downturn, slashed the division. Intellivision faded, even as competitors like Nintendo emerged from the wreckage with a new vision. For those who had one, Intellivision felt like a secret club, something a little different, a little more thoughtful. Now it is mostly remembered in retrospectives and collector forums, another what could have been buried under layers of silicon and nostalgia. A&W Draft Root Beer in bottles tried to capture the nostalgic charm of soda shop fizz and bring it home, complete with the thick, foamy head you only got from a fountain pour. The concept was bold. This was not just root beer, it was draft root beer, sealed in glass bottles and marketed as the real deal. But the problem started the moment you opened one. There was no fizz, no foam, just flat sweetness and disappointment. The signature frothy pour, the creamy bite, the thing that made draft root beer draft, was gone. Consumers felt duped. Without the head, it was just a smoother version of regular root beer, but in a bottle that promised more. Sales slowed, feedback soured, and the product quietly vanished. Today, even die-hard root beer fans barely remember it. The draft label stayed on some cans, but the bottled dream dissolved. Still, the idea was rooted in nostalgia. Frigidaire Ice Crusher refrigerator looked like the kind of luxury only seen in the magazines. With its sparkling chrome accents, soft pastel tones, and a futuristic ice crusher built right in, this refrigerator was a showpiece. Housewives marveled at the convenience of crushed ice on demand. A real marvel in an era where entertaining at home meant everything. But the dream quickly melted into frustration. The ice crusher jammed constantly, spraying half-frozen shards into awkward clumps or refusing to work altogether. It made a terrible noise, like a blender chewing gravel. And worse, it often leaked inside the freezer, creating icy messes that ruined everything from fish fillets to frozen pies. Repairmen made their rounds, scratching their heads at the complicated mechanisms while assuring folks it was just a kink to work out. But the kink never went away. It became a kind of cold-hearted family member, temperamental, but always there. And when it finally gave out, it left behind more than broken parts. It left behind the memory of a time when having crushed ice felt like living in the future, even if that future came with puddles. Brown. Together, they were supposed to represent warmth, nature, and the grounded spirit of the 1970s. Designers called them earth tones. Homeowners called them modern. But within a few years, most people started calling them ugly. These colors crept into every corner of the house, from rust-colored curtains and burnt orange sofas to chocolate-brown carpets and gold-tinted kitchenware. When paired with low lighting and wood paneling, the effect was not soothing. It was stifling. Rooms felt smaller, homes felt older. The optimism of the post-war era was gone, and in its place came heavy, saturated tones that weighed everything down. It was like living inside a forever sunset that never let up. Even kids' bedrooms, meant to be bright and fun, often ended up looking like burnt orange caves. By the time the 1980s rolled around, decorators ran screaming toward pastels, neon, and glass. Orange and brown were buried under coats of white paint and forgotten, like the dusty shag carpets they often matched. But style was not the only thing people gave up on. Sometimes, even the furniture itself just gave out. Now imagine being a kid in the 1980s. You see a commercial where a kid is floating through the air like they are on the moon. Enter moon shoes, mini trampolines for your feet. A miracle of plastic, rubber bands, and hope. The packaging promised anti-gravity fun. But what you got was 2 slabs of plastic that shook your ankles into submission. You strapped them onto your sneakers, took a few hopeful jumps, and within 5 minutes, you were sitting on the ground nursing a bruised shin. They were supposed to be fun. Instead, they became an unofficial rite of passage for backyard injuries. Sure, you might get one satisfying bounce in before the strap snapped off or your foot twisted sideways like it had a mind of its own. But that did not stop kids from begging for them. We were promised space adventures. We got orthopedic bills. Still, for one fleeting second, you felt like an astronaut, and then you remembered you were just in the driveway, stuck in a pair of squeaky plastic traps. But if your feet were not being tortured, chances are your telephone was, because the next trend had a serious case of over-accessorizing. But even with a football legend at the front, it still missed the catch. The 1980s really wanted men to care about gloves. Not work gloves, not winter gloves, but luxury comfort gloves. Enter isotoner. They were supposed to be the Cadillac of handwear, sleek, stretchy, and backed by none other than Dan Marino himself. Yes, that Dan Marino. The glove was featured in ads where Marino would flash his hands like they were national treasures. The pitch was simple. Your hands deserve respect. The reality? Nobody was asking for this. These gloves were fine, but they were not revolutionary, and certainly not life-changing. Isotoner's massive ad campaign made the product feel overhyped and weirdly intimate. Like, why is Dan Marino caressing his own hands like that? It was one of those rare cases where the marketing machine worked too hard and ended up making the product feel silly. Plus, most people buying gloves in the 1980s were not doing it because of a sports endorsement. They were doing it because it was snowing. And if you think that is strange, just wait until we revisit one of the most dangerous playground toys to ever roll out of a toy aisle. Spoiler, it has no handles, no brakes, and absolutely no chill. Let us talk about one of the weirdest, most unnecessary attempts at portable food ever invented. And trust me, you could not wash this one down with coffee. Instant breakfast cubes. They sound like something a time traveler would pack, right? Small, compact cubes that supposedly gave you a full breakfast with just a few chews. One flavor even promised the taste of bacon and eggs. The marketing pitch? Pure convenience. No cooking, no cleanup, just pop it in your mouth and start your day. But here is the thing. Nobody wants to chew their pancakes. These things were dry, chalky, and tasted like someone crammed a greasy diner into a vitamin pill. Most people had to drink water just to get them down. Plus, they were weirdly expensive. The kind of price tag that made you say, I could buy real food instead. Families tried them once for the novelty, and then shoved them in the back of the pantry where they sat until the expiration date. The only people who mildly enjoyed them were hikers and doomsday preppers, and even they admitted it was more about storage than taste. What made it worse? The cubes melted in the heat and crumbled in your pocket. Breakfast was not supposed to feel like a science experiment, but that did not stop companies from trying to futurize every part of the day, including how you made a phone call from your car. The floppy disk, a cornerstone of early personal computing, emerged in the late 1960s, symbolizing the first foray into portable digital storage. When the 3.5-inch floppy was introduced, many pondered, who would ever need that much storage? A notion that now elicits a chuckle in our gigabyte-saturated age. The act of inserting a floppy disk, accompanied by its characteristic click, defined an era of computing in the 80s and 90s. Despite its obsolescence due to advancing storage technologies, the floppy disk endures in the digital lexicon, immortalized as the universal save file icon. This subtle homage serves as a nostalgic reminder of the disk's pivotal role in the evolution of data storage and management. Plymouth was never the flashiest name on the road, but it was trusted, reliable, American. It was the car your uncle fixed up in the driveway, the station wagon that took families to the Grand Canyon, the compact that young drivers learned to parallel park with. In the 1970s, Plymouth had already seen better days, but there was still hope. Then the market shifted. Gas prices spiked, Japanese imports hit harder and faster than anyone expected, and Plymouth's offerings started to feel outdated. Chrysler focused its attention elsewhere. Dodge got the performance, Chrysler got the luxury, and Plymouth got what was left. People still bought them, but it felt like settling. You were not proud to drive a Plymouth. You were just glad it still ran. Sales dipped. Innovation stalled. Even iconic models like the Duster could not save the brand. The writing was on the wall. By the 1990s, Plymouth was a forgotten middle child, unloved and unnecessary. In 2001, Chrysler officially pulled the plug. For decades, Plymouth had been a quiet part of the American story, and now it is a footnote. But the memories remain in faded photos, old commercials, and the sound of an engine that will not come back. The Apple Newton was supposed to be your digital assistant. Instead, it became your very expensive paperweight. Released in the early 1990s, the Newton promised to take notes, schedule meetings, and recognize your handwriting. The problem? It barely understood anything you wrote. You could jot down "buy milk," and it might decide you meant "bug silk." People mocked it endlessly, especially after a famous cartoon made fun of the Newton's glitchy handwriting recognition. It was also big, bulky, heavy, like a pocket computer that did not really fit in your pocket. Apple was ahead of its time, but the tech just was not there yet. The Newton ran out of battery life fast, cost several $100s, and crashed often. For early adopters, it was both exciting and exhausting. Apple quietly discontinued it after Steve Jobs returned to the company. He reportedly hated the idea. But even with all its flaws, the Newton walked so that later devices like the iPhone and iPad could run. It failed, yes, but it failed forward. Still, in the 1990s, it was one more product people bought with hope and returned with disappointment. Tamagotchi was the original digital pet, and for a while it ruled recess. But then came the spin-offs, The Gigapets, Nano Babies, and every other pixelated creature someone tried to hatch on a keychain. These knockoffs flooded the market fast, and they fizzled out even faster. Every company wanted a piece of the virtual pet craze, but few could capture the charm and chaos of the original. Some pets were too needy, others barely moved. The graphics got worse, the batteries died quicker, and in most cases, the novelty wore off before the batteries even ran out. Kids who begged for one lost interest by the weekend. The market got saturated, and with every new release, the magic thinned out. What started as a digital revolution turned into background noise. Parents were not fooled. Teachers banned them from classrooms. And before long, Gigapets and their spin-off friends were stuffed in drawers, replaced by newer, shinier distractions. Tamagotchi may still have a nostalgic pulse, but its clones are long forgotten. Sometimes imitation is not flattery. It is just a shortcut to failure. Delia's catalog was not just a fashion catalog, it was a lifeline. For teen girls in the 1990s, it arrived in the mailbox like a handwritten invitation to coolness. Chunky shoes, plaid skirts, glitter lip gloss, Delia's had it all. And it spoke in a language kids actually understood. Every page felt like a secret glimpse into a better version of yourself. The models looked like the girls you went to school with, just a little more polished, a little more confident. You did not just want the clothes, you wanted the life that came with them. And for a few dollars and a phone call, it felt almost possible. It was cheeky, clever, and full of attitude, way before that became the norm. Shopping malls were still dominant, but Delia's gave you something else, a sense of independence. You could browse from your bedroom, circle what you liked, and dream. But trends are cruel. As fast fashion chains took over and the internet made catalogs feel ancient, Delia's struggled to keep up. They opened brick-and-mortar stores, but the magic was in the mail. And without that charm, it lost its edge. The catalog stopped coming. And with it, a generation quietly said goodbye to the style guide of their adolescence. In the 1970s, someone decided garbage needed to be glamorous. Designer trash bags hit the shelves, promising households a chic upgrade to an otherwise smelly task. These bags came in neon colors, stripes, florals, even psychedelic swirls, like a disco floor for your trash can. The ads showed smiling families carrying out trash in style, as if hauling potato peels and coffee grounds in polka dots made it any better. But here was the catch. They tore the second you filled them. A bag of leftovers? Ripped. A few empty cans? Split wide open. Garbage spilled across driveways in a rainbow mess, leaving parents furious at having spent good money on a worse product. Kids laughed at the absurdity, nothing like watching dad chase orange peels rolling downhill in a bag decorated with daisies. Still, some people bought into the hype. They matched their avocado green kitchens with equally modern trash decor, convinced this was the future of homemaking. Magazines even praised them as functional fashion, though most consumers knew better after 1 week. By the end of the fad, most folks returned to sturdy black or brown bags, grateful for durability over disco flair. Today, designer trash bags live on only in jokes about just how far the 1970s pushed style into everyday life. Do you remember dragging a patterned bag to the curb, only to watch it collapse before you even made it to the street? It glowed like nuclear waste and tasted like citrus sugar and ghosts. Hi-C Ecto Cooler was not just a juice box, it was a phenomenon. Slapped with the green face of Slimer from Ghostbusters, it rode the wave of 1980s pop culture straight into kids' lunchboxes. For many, this was the crown jewel of cafeteria trading. One sip, and you were instantly cooler. Parents bought it for peace, kids drank it for power. But then the movies stopped. The cartoons dried up, and without its pop culture engine, Ecto Cooler slowed to a crawl. In the late 1990s, it was rebranded under different names, but it was never the same. The color changed, the taste faded. By the early 2000s, it was gone. And yet, people never let it go. Fan campaigns begged for its return. It popped up again for a brief moment with the Ghostbusters reboot in 2016. Like a ghost of its former self, But that did not last. Ecto-Cooler's magic was tied to a time, a vibe, a feeling you cannot mass-produce anymore. It was artificial, yes, but it was also real in the way it made us feel, like summer break in a box, gone, but never quite dead. In the 1980s, if you were not wearing Nike, you were probably wearing LA Gear. The brand was flash, neon colors, high tops with see-through soles, glitter on some models. They were sneakers that shouted, and they found fans fast, especially among kids and teens. They looked like something a pop star would wear on stage. And that was no accident. LA Gear poured money into celebrity endorsements, from Paula Abdul to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The shoes were everywhere. It felt like every mall window, every magazine ad, and every teen drama had someone rocking LA Gear. For a brief moment, it was not just a brand. It was the pulse of youth culture. But here is the thing about fashion. It moves fast. Too fast for a brand that built its entire identity on being trendy. LA Gear could not figure out what it wanted to be next. The designs became over the top. Stores started marking them down. The cool factor evaporated. And just like that, the empire began to crumble. By the 1990s, LA Gear was being sold in discount outlets. Today, you might spot a pair in the back of someone's closet, but they are mostly forgotten. At its height, LA Gear made you feel like you were part of something loud and exciting. Now, it is a quiet reminder that style always comes with a countdown. The next food flop was almost cruel. It handed kids the dream of pizza night, then made them make it themselves. Hidden Valley Ranch pizza kits sounded like a great idea on paper. It was the 1980s. Ranch dressing was having a moment, and pizza was the undisputed king of dinner tables. So why not bring them together in a do-it-yourself dinner kit for kids? The box came with everything: dough mix, ranch-flavored sauce, and powdered cheese. All you had to do was follow the steps. But that was the problem. Kids were too young to manage it, and parents were too busy to help. The ranch sauce was tangy to the point of sour, the crust baked unevenly, and the result never looked like the picture. Today, it is mostly remembered by food historians and people who still cringe at the smell of ranch powder in a hot oven. But while this kit was a failure in kitchens, rotisserie ovens for the home looked like the centerpiece of a kitchen that truly had it all. Spinning meat, golden and glistening behind a glass panel, promised restaurant-style meals without ever leaving your house. It was showy, dramatic, and felt like a little bit of television magic landed on your countertop. But the excitement quickly gave way to dread. These ovens took forever. They cooked unevenly. One side of the chicken would crisp, while the other side sagged and steamed. Grease splattered everywhere, dripping down into trays that were impossible to clean properly. And because they were bulky, they devoured counter space and collected dust when not in use, which was most of the time. Still, people wanted to believe. After all, what was more luxurious than carving a whole roast straight from a spinning spit? But that luxury came at a cost, and not just in electricity. It came in the form of undercooked dinners, burnt edges, and a smell that never quite left the kitchen. Eventually, most rotisserie ovens were shoved into storage or gifted to a cousin who loved to cook. They were kitchen theater, flashy, noisy, and mostly impractical. But for a moment in time, they made home cooks feel like gourmet chefs, even if the audience never clapped. They were supposed to bring families closer, literally. The 1970s conversation pit was the sunken living room trend that promised intimacy, a cool, modern flair, and space-saving elegance. You would step down into a cozy nest of shag carpet and low-slung cushions surrounded by walnut paneling and maybe even a built-in bar. It looked like something from a futuristic home magazine, the kind of place where you could host groovy parties or settle in for deep chats. But in practice, it was awkward, inconvenient, and kind of dangerous. People tripped, drinks spilled, kids fell. The novelty of a lowered living space wore off fast when people realized how hard it was to furnish and how easy it was to injure yourself. In the end, the only thing the conversation pit really sparked was a conversation about remodeling costs. And cleaning it? Imagine vacuuming stairs and crevices after every visit. As the decades wore on, what had once seemed bold and modern quickly felt dated and bizarre, like a relic of a dream that never quite worked. Real estate agents began referring to them as trip pits. Renovators filled them in. It turns out that deliberately building a hole into your living room is not the best long-term plan. And while conversation pits disappeared quietly, their colorful cousin in the kitchen refused to go without making a scene. You knew a kid was cool if their necklace made noise from down the hallway. Enter the plastic charm necklace. These things were a fashion statement and a choking hazard all rolled into one. A long, brightly colored chain that you decked out with dozens of plastic trinkets. Mini roller skates, tiny telephones, hair dryers, soda bottles, and anything else the size of your thumb. The more charms, the better. It was like curating your own loud, clunky resume of childhood interests. Everyone traded them. Everyone bragged about having the rare ones. And of course, the plastic was cheap enough to snap if you breathed on it wrong. Teachers hated them. Parents hated stepping on them. But kids loved how collectible they felt. That is, until the day you leaned over your desk and your entire charm empire dumped itself on the floor like a sad little toy avalanche. Still, for a while, they were the perfect combination of fashion and fun. And speaking of things that looked fun but failed to function properly, wait until we talk about the time theaters tried to make movies smell like real life. Smell-o-vision is one of those ideas that never needed to come back, but the 1980s brought it back anyway. Originally dreamed up decades earlier, it was the concept of pumping scents into a movie theater to match what was happening on screen. Think popcorn, flowers, burning rubber, and maybe a little regret. In the 1980s, a few studios tried to revive the concept with updated tech. Scratch and sniff cards were handed out before showtime, promising a full sensory experience. Spoiler alert, the cards smelled like crayons, the timing was always off, and half the audience forgot to scratch anything at all. Even more ambitious theaters installed actual scent machines that pumped artificial smells through the air vents. Which, fun fact, is exactly how you make a whole crowd nauseous during an action scene. Smell-o-vision failed because, unlike sound or visuals, scent is wildly subjective. And when it is artificial, it just smells like someone spilled perfume on a couch cushion. And speaking of odd inventions that had their moment before quietly disappearing, let us talk about the time schools had to ban a certain wrist gadget that made kids feel like geniuses. Enter the Sony CV-2000. This was supposed to be the next big leap in home entertainment. A video recorder you could use at home long before VHS was a thing. It sounds amazing, right? Until you realize this beast was massive, heavy, and cost more than most people's cars at the time. We are talking over $1,000 in 1960s money, which is a good chunk of a year's salary for the average person. But price was just one problem. The CV-2000 used reel-to-reel videotape, and even getting it to work with your television set was a gamble. It only recorded in black and white. You had to plug in a separate camera, adjust the knobs just right, and cross your fingers. If anything went wrong, and it often did, you were stuck. Playback was spotty, the tapes jammed constantly, and editing footage? Forget it. For a product meant to bring television magic into your home, it mostly just brought headaches. And despite being the first of its kind, it quietly faded into obscurity, beaten later by cheaper, easier options. But you know what still had people gathering around the television back then? A wild piece of gear that looked like it came straight off a flying saucer. The VCR, a marvel that arrived in the 1970s, was akin to a magician in a box, granting us the power to capture time itself. Suddenly, TV schedules no longer dictated our lives. We could record, rewind, and relive our favorite moments at will. The VCR was the herald of home cinema, a concept so revolutionary that even its hefty price tag couldn't dampen its allure. It's a testament to its impact that phrases like "be kind, rewind" are etched in the collective memory of a generation. As DVDs and streaming services emerged, the VCR's star faded, but its legacy of shaping family movie nights and introducing the world to video rentals lives on. Record Bar was not just a store, it was a ritual. A place where teenagers went to spend their last few dollars on a cassette, where college students flipped through vinyl with purpose, and where parents hunted for the next hit their kids could play too loud. The smell of shrink wrap, the sound of headphones clamped over your ears, that feeling of holding a new album like it was a treasure. In the 1970s and 1980s, Record Bar was in malls across America. It was part of the cultural fabric. But time moved on. Music got smaller. First the CD, then the download, and finally the invisible stream. Malls lost their sparkle, the ritual faded, and Record Bar, like so many others, folded under the weight of a world that no longer needed it. The music still plays, but the experience is gone. You can click a button now, but you will never get that feeling again. That quiet buzz of possibility as you stepped through the door. The Nintendo Virtual Boy looked like a spaceship crashed into a pair of binoculars and decided to play games. Released in the mid-1990s, it was Nintendo's leap into virtual reality, except it did not leap so much as stumble. Players had to shove their faces into a visor mounted on a little stand like they were doing a weird science experiment. The display? Glowing red wireframe graphics on a black screen? That was it. No color, no depth, just eye strain and headaches. And yes, people really did complain about headaches. It was supposed to be portable, but you could not move your head while using it. It was supposed to be immersive, but most games barely lasted 30 minutes before your eyes begged for mercy. Nintendo hyped it up as the future of gaming. The reality was a lonely desk toy that cost too much and delivered too little. Sales were disastrous. Fewer than 1 million units sold. Even die-hard Nintendo fans stayed quiet about this one. It was discontinued within a year, swept under the rug like a secret no one wanted to admit. But Virtual Boy did one thing right. It showed Nintendo where not to go. Today, it lives on as a cautionary tale. A strange relic from a time when red lines and motionless goggles were somehow considered cutting edge. The Virtual Boy did not fail quietly. It failed in bright, flashing red. Pump shoes made you feel like a superhero until you realized the pump did almost nothing. Released with wild hype in the early 1990s, these sneakers came with an inflatable pouch that let you pump up the tongue of your shoe for a customized fit. At least, that was the promise. What you actually got was a pair of sneakers that cost way too much and made you feel cool for about 5 minutes. Every kid wanted them. Every parent hesitated at the price tag. The commercials were loud, bold, and full of slam dunks. But on the playground, they were just another pair of shoes. The pump was more of a gimmick than a game changer. It gave the illusion of high-tech gear, but really it was just a plastic bubble that deflated your expectations. The hype wore off fast, and Reebok never quite recovered the same magic. Today, they live on as a nostalgic relic, worn ironically or remembered with a smirk. Because let's face it, if your shoes need air to work, maybe it is not the shoes that need fixing. KB Toys was a staple of every shopping mall, tucked into a corner near the food court or next to the clothing stores you ignored as a kid. It was loud, packed to the ceiling with toys, and had just enough chaos to make your parents nervous. But for children in the 1990s, it was paradise. Unlike big box giants like Toys R Us, KB Toys felt scrappy and spontaneous. Every aisle had that treasure hunt energy. It was small enough to feel personal, but big enough to carry the latest action figures, Tamagotchis, and Nerf blasters. And then came the competition. Big retailers slashed prices. E-commerce started creeping in. KB's tight mall footprint became more of a curse than a charm. And when the economy stumbled in the early 2000s, so did the toy stores. They declared bankruptcy, came back, and then finally vanished altogether. For kids of that decade, KB Toys was not just a store. It was the main event after school or the grand prize for surviving a family outing. And when it disappeared, it took with it a little bit of magic. Toys still exist, sure, but they do not sit on a shelf calling your name the same way anymore. In the mid-1970s, thanks to movies like Smokey and the Bandit, Citizens band radios became the must-have gadget. Everyone, from suburban dads to teenagers, grabbed a CB and learned the lingo. Suddenly, folks who had never driven a truck were saying "Breaker 19" and giving themselves call signs. It was like social media on static-filled airwaves. For a while, it was fun. Kids used them like walkie-talkies, parents eavesdropped on strangers, and everyone thought they were part of some secret club. But the novelty wore off fast. Too many people crowded the channels. Conversations devolved into nonsense, and the slang became a parody of itself. Soon, the fad collapsed under its own noise. Radios gathered dust in garages, their antennas bent and forgotten. Only truckers kept them alive, while regular folks quietly moved on. Still, the craze left its mark. For a few years, even PTA meetings and backyard barbecues had people throwing around CB handles like they were in on a joke. Today, CBS still exist, but mostly as tools, not toys. Do you remember families huddled around, laughing as Dad said, "Copy that," into a box that no one needed? You could spot it a mile away, the tall, slim pink can with the word Tab screaming from the side. For a generation of women in the 1980s, Tab was more than just a diet soda. It was marketed like a lifestyle. Drink Tab, stay thin, be modern, that was the fantasy. And it worked. Its saccharine taste and strange chemical afterglow didn't matter. You drank it because your mom did, because your aunt kept a case in the garage, because it felt like rebellion in a can. But Tab's magic began to wear off by the end of the decade. Coca-Cola launched Diet Coke, and suddenly, Tab looked old, outdated, forgotten. It limped along through the 1990s, more of a relic than a brand. In some regions, it vanished quietly. In others, it clung on thanks to loyalists who refused to let go. But eventually, even the diehards gave up. When Coca-Cola discontinued Tab in 2020, it was almost a formality. The real death happened long before that. It was when the last pink can sat warm and lonely on a dusty shelf, waiting for someone who no longer remembered the taste. Tab wasn't just a diet drink. It was a promise. One we outgrew, or maybe one that outgrew us. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. That slogan was everywhere in the 1980s. Television, magazines, even bumper stickers. E.F. Hutton was more than a brokerage firm. It was an institution. It promised wisdom, confidence, and a touch of elite mystery. Clients trusted it, but trust is a fragile thing. In the mid-1980s, E.F. Hutton was caught in a check kiting scandal that rocked the financial world. They were essentially writing fake checks to inflate their balance sheets. Not exactly the kind of leadership people want in their money managers. Fines were paid, leadership shuffled, but the damage was done. Clients fled. The name became a punchline. Eventually, E.F. Hutton was sold, rebranded, and swallowed up by other companies. The slogan disappeared, and with it, the aura of trust they had spent decades building. It is a sharp reminder. Even giants can trip on the smallest cracks. The next product went down for the exact opposite reason. It tried to turn bubblegum into soda, and America gagged. Hubba Bubba soda sounded like a joke, but it was real, fizzy, and unfortunately, very pink. Inspired by the gum that filled every kid's pocket in the 1980s, the soda promised that same sweet, stretchy bubblegum taste, in liquid form. It was created by the Wrigley Company and sold in neon bottles that practically shouted from the shelf. The first sip was pure sugar. The second sip was regret. People could not quite figure out what they were drinking. Was it supposed to be candy or soda? And who exactly wanted to gulp bubblegum? The carbonation only made things worse, turning the already strange flavor into a syrupy explosion that clung to your throat. Kids might have tried it once for the novelty. Adults passed it over with a wince. Trash compactors entered American kitchens like they were the final step in a fully modern home. Just step on the pedal, hear that mechanical grind, and watch your garbage shrink down to nothing. No more overstuffed bags or leaky bins. It felt like magic. But that magic turned sour quickly. The machines were loud, they reeked, and worst of all, They had a habit of breaking down after just a few months of use. Cleaning them was unpleasant at best, horrifying at worst. Food gunk, juices, and smells would cling to the interior like they had signed a lease. And if anything ever spilled inside, especially liquids, it became a slow-cooking disaster. Still, people loved the idea. Fewer trips to the outdoor bin, less visible mess. But the reality was far less glamorous. Most families stopped using them altogether, opting instead for traditional garbage bins and regular bags. It turned out that crushing trash did not make it disappear. It just made it harder to deal with. Eventually, the compactors were either removed entirely or left installed and unplugged, serving as weird metallic tombs for yesterday's dreams of domestic efficiency. They are still found in older kitchens, hiding behind cabinet doors, whispering of a time when garbage got its own machine. Built-in intercom systems were supposed to be the future. Press a button in the kitchen, and you could talk to someone 2 rooms away. No yelling, no walking upstairs, just crystal-clear communication across your house. Except, not really. These systems were clunky, ugly, and often broken. The audio quality was closer to a drive-through speaker than anything futuristic. Static, echoes, and random bursts of feedback became the norm, and when they did work, it often felt like you were eavesdropping more than talking. Even as a novelty, the intercom felt outdated within a few years, replaced by cordless phones and then home cell lines. What was once cutting-edge quickly became awkward background noise. People quickly realized that a cordless phone, or just walking down the hall, was faster and less frustrating. Within a decade, these systems went from high-end status symbols to forgotten wall boxes gathering dust. Some were hidden behind art, others were ripped out entirely. But if avocado green had a twin in tragedy, it was coming next. A color so bold, so sunny, and so divisive that it burned itself into America's kitchen memory forever. Not a single one of these made it to the 1990s with its reputation intact. The boxes are gone, the jingles are forgotten, and the shelf space went to something else. If you remember buying any of these, share this with someone who does too, and subscribe for more.